And welcome back. I'm so pleased and honored to have in the studio with me the former Secretary of Labor, the current chairman of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, Tom Perez. Thank you, Secretary Perez, Chairman Perez.
Tom is a lot easier, Tom. The two Toms are here today. It's great to be with you, Tom.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, what is the vision of the Democratic Party right now? What are we doing? What are you doing? But we too. I mean, this is a collaborative effort. I hope. I suspect.
Absolutely.
What are our priorities? Where do we go?
Sure. Our vision is shared prosperity for everyone. We want to build an America in which everybody has access to the American dream, a good job, a health care that is affordable and quality, housing security, physical security. You go to your neighborhood school, and it's a good quality public school. An education secretary who actually believes in public education. Right. The water that comes out of your tap is safe, and you don't have to worry about whether it's been tainted. That's the America we're building, an America of shared prosperity. And as you know, Tom, because you've been talking about this for years, our economy is way out of balance. The unfinished business of this recovery is income inequality. And the Democratic Party is fighting to make sure that everybody has a fair shake so that we can indeed build an America of shared prosperity. I don't believe the Gilded Age was a golden age.
No, it wasn't.
And we have this unmitigated assault on the labor movement, this unmitigated assault on Planned Parenthood, this unmitigated assault on lawyers like my wife, who's a legal aid lawyer, who helps folks who are living in the shadows. And as my friend Lee Saunders, the head of AFSCME, says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And there is a unrelenting effort from the far right, and they got a major league assist with this most recent confirmation on the Supreme Court, this unmitigated assault on the labor movement. And so our vision for the Democratic Party is to make sure we're out there fighting for a better future for everyone. And we do that by building strong parties everywhere, by having an every zip code strategy, and by building strong partnerships with the progressive movement, with our folks at a grassroots level, with faith leaders who understand that income inequality is a moral issue as well as an economic issue. And we've got work to do, Tom, and you know that. As we were talking offline, we've experimented over the last 10 years with the notion that we can win elections by having without having parties and a party structure that is particularly robust. And I think we know from the 10 years of all the elections we've lost, we've got to build strong parties and strong partnerships.
I have been calling for years. Back in 2008, as I recall, there was a group called the Concord, it wasn't the Coalition, Concord something. And they put a bunch of YouTubes up. Say that again? I think so. I think Concord Project, Troy says. And it was funded, I believe, by the Koch network. It was one of these Tea Party groups. And it was basically how, as a Tea Party, and their YouTubes are still out there. You can watch them. In fact, I play them on the show all the time. This was a how-to the Tea Party average guy or gal, the average person, how to take over the Republican Party. And they started out saying the most powerful job in America, politically speaking, is precinct committee person or precinct committee chair. And it was all about how to join your local party and become a precinct committee person, because they're the people who determine who the primary candidates are going to be. So if they could get like 4 Tea Partiers on the primary, then they know that a Tea Partier is going to be on the general election. And they're the people who write the platform or start the writing of the platform. And we've been having now for years people calling in, bragging on how, hey, I'm now a Democratic precinct committee person in Denver or in San Francisco or in Los Angeles, whatever. So, that's been kind of my focus on getting people into the party and building the party. I'm not sure what else to encourage people to do. Thoughts, suggestions? Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I think it's a great idea. And I mean, one of the things we've learned in our outreach is that there are a lot of places where we didn't have anyone doing that. When I was out in Kansas during the campaign for DNC chair, we learned that there were counties where there just de facto wasn't a Democratic Party presence, and they're changing that. And Kansas is a great example of what we can do when we organize, when we build the party and put our values into action. Donald Trump won Kansas by 14 points. The Democrats picked up 14 seats in the state legislature last year, Tom.
That's great.
In Kansas. And then you look now, I think there are 2 congressional seats. I think it's Congressional 2 and Congressional 3 in Kansas that we can pick up next year. Why? Because we're running good candidates. Our message is clear. We want a good education for everyone. I mean, you look at what Sam Brownback is doing in Kansas. It is radical right-wing engineering. And, that was the state of Nancy Kassebaum, a pretty moderate Republican. And Sam Brownback is the antithesis of that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's an example of what you're getting at. When the Tea Party took over Kansas, what you saw was radical right-wing engineering that has decimated their healthcare infrastructure, decimated their educational infrastructure, and that is why we have a chance. But we only have a chance, it seems to me, Tom, when we're organizing. And we got to organize 12 months a year, because I distinguish between mobilizing and organizing. And we're pretty good at mobilizing, that 3-month sprint. But you know what? If you want to win elections, you got to talk to people now. And one new tenet of the Democratic Party is there's no such thing as an off year. We got to be out there every month of the year. That's why we're doing Resistance Summer right now, which is a down payment on that 12-month-a-year organizing philosophy that we must re-embrace as a party.
And yet resisting, I mean, this is what the Republicans did with your boss, Barack Obama, when you were labor secretary, is resist, resist, resist. It was basically the essence of pretty much everything they had. And you could argue that it worked for them, but we need to have, or we do have, a set of core values. You've articulated them: good health care, good education, things like, an economy that works, more income equality rather than inequality. It seems like there's the kind of the vision of FDR that actually worked, and making the government the employer of last resort. He didn't get into healthcare. Harry Truman tried to first proposed single payer healthcare, so that that was kind of part of that whole making supporting labor unions, individual rights, all these things that got picked up again by Lyndon Johnson with the Great Society. But that the Democratic Party, it seems to me and to many of my callers, I think, hasn't just crystallized this down to bumper stickers yet. And perhaps it's because of the so-called conservatives still in the Democratic Party, or I'm not sure. You must have a hell of a balancing act that you've got to do, between these factions. But wouldn't it be wise for the party to say, okay, here are we are going to come right out and say we're in favor of single-payer health care, for example. We are going to come right out and say that we think that, we want to reverse specifically. So, we want to go back to enforcing the Sherman Antitrust Act that Reagan stopped enforcing in '82, or we want to change the way the pensions are booked, again, from the Reagan era. Just very specific things. We're college for all. Some of the old Bernie campaign stuff. I mean, how do we do this?
I mean, the first point that you make that I think is imperative for us is we will continue to resist, and we will persist in that resistance, but we also have to articulate what we stand for. In my travels across the country, Tom, I hear repeatedly from folks, I appreciate what you're doing, in taking on all of the excess of Donald Trump, but that's not enough. What do you stand for? And we stand for shared prosperity for everyone, a good job for everyone, good health care for everyone. We believe that health care is a right for all and not a privilege for a few. And one of the silver linings of this health care debate is I met a lot of folks who said, I don't know the differences between the Democrats and the Republicans. I don't know what the Democratic Party stands for. And what they're telling me now, as they see the excesses of this administration and they see us out there fighting against the Muslim ban, because we believe our diversity is our greatest strength as a country. I was down in Austin, Texas earlier this week at a rally to plant the flag clearly, because the most important issues confronting Texas right now, they have a terrible healthcare system. They should expand Medicaid. Their public education system is lousy. They need to improve it. They have they have to create better jobs that pay a middle-class wage. But is that what Governor Abbott is focused on? No. He's focused on bathrooms. And he's focused on demagoguing the immigration issue with the sanctuary city thing. And you know what? Those are such warped priorities. And when we're out there as Democrats, which is why I was in Austin, telling folks that we are here with you. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So when my LGBTQ brothers and sisters are at risk, I'm at risk. And when my immigrant brothers and sisters are at risk, we're at risk. When our labor union colleagues and Planned Parenthood are at risk, we're all at risk. And I believe we're making progress, Tom, because we have been clearly putting our values into action. People said we'd never be able to hold back the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And, you know, they're going to keep fighting to repeal it. So nobody should be spiking footballs. Everybody should have their guard up. But you know what? The reason why we've had success so far is because, number one, the truth and the facts are on our side. But equally importantly, we've been organizing. And people like you, Tom, and the listeners here have been going to their members. And you know, it's not just Democrats who have pre-existing conditions. It's every zip code. The opioid epidemic does not discriminate.
Meanwhile, the Republicans, and this is, you know, I mentioned FDR like, you know, okay, our ideas have been tried, and they work. The Republicans' ideas have been tried. They were tried in the 1920s. You know, Harding ran on a platform of less government, less business, more business in government, less government in business. In other words, deregulate and privatize, and drop the top tax rate from 91% to 25%. He did both those things. That kicked off the Roaring '20s and took us right into the Great Depression. So we know the Republican policies don't work. We know the Democratic policies do work when we go back to them. And so the Republicans, as Plan B, have said, to hell with policy. We're just going to make sure people can't vote. And you're talking about this. You wrote this great op-ed. I'm not sure exactly where this is published.
This is in Time.
Time magazine. Thank you. DNC, the Democratic plan to combat Trump's voter suppression commission. You want to tell us about this?
Sure. I mean, I was in Texas this week, and it's a great example. The Republican leadership in Texas, they can't win the battle of ideas because their ideas are wrong for the vast majority of Texans. So what do? They pass a voter ID law. They engage in racial gerrymandering. Let's have a battle in the marketplace of ideas, and then let's work together to make sure that every single eligible voter can vote. But voter suppression, we have to acknowledge, is a staple in the Republican playbook. I know that because I had the privilege of heading up the Civil Rights Division, and we had to sue South Carolina, we had to sue Texas, North Carolina, so many other states. This is a staple. We can't win on the ideas, so let's make it harder to vote, whether it's these pernicious voter ID laws, whether it's the partisan gerrymandering that we see taking place, whether it's the racial gerrymandering, whether it's the purges of voters, and most recently, as I note in this piece, this creation of the so-called Election Integrity Commission, which is the most misnamed commission, Tom, I've seen. And by the way, Chris Kobach, this radical right-wing social engineer who was sanctioned by a federal court literally a month or so ago for lack of candor in a voting lawsuit. Chris Kobach and integrity do not belong in the same sentence.
Are you familiar with a statement that Paul Weyrich made to a group of Republicans in 1980? Can I play this? Yes. This guy was helping run the Reagan campaign in 1980. Here it is, right here.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
Now, that guy, he was the co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, the co-founder of ALEC, and, you know, was helping run the Reagan campaign at that time. So the Republicans have been thinking about this. That was 37 years ago. So in the minute and a half we have left, what can we do? What can our listeners or viewers do to
make sure you don't allow this election commission to intimidate you? There have been reports in Colorado of people who are withdrawing their registration because they don't want the commission to have that information. With all due respect, that's the last thing we should be doing. You should be calling your friends and telling them to register to vote, because the best remedy here is to vote these folks out of office. So we need folks to organize out there and understand this. We need to be forming, and this is what we're doing at the DNC. We have a voter protection and empowerment unit that we're establishing and have established, a 50-state strategy for voter protection. So I hope your listeners will volunteer with us, because we need to build that capacity, not just 8 weeks before an election, but we've got to be vigilant, because I have seen a lot of bad things happening here in this context. I've listened to that tape you've played, and that embodies their philosophy. Voter suppression is here to stay, and we are not going to allow it. This is a matter of protecting our democracy, Tom, and this was one of the main reasons I ran for DNC chair. Too many people died for the right to vote for us to allow this to happen. We won't, and we're fighting back like all get out.
Good on you. Thomas Paine called the vote the beating heart of democracy.
Amen.
It's sacred. Chairman Perez, thank you so much.
Great to be with you and your listeners, Tom.
Great. Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee and the former Secretary of Labor, Obama.